Yesterday, we saw two prominent voices in our country speak to the millions of Americans nationwide who are grappling with grief and uncertainty in the days following the shooting rampage in Arizona. The events of Saturday morning stunned the nation. And in the subsequent days, many questions were raised about the role of the media, the political climate, gun control, health care. Questions were raised about the shooter, Jared Lee Loughner, and his motivations. And of course, there were the victims. Who were they? Just average Americans, actually, engaging in the political process. A federal judge, an up-and-coming public servant, a 9-year-old girl. As all of these thoughts cluttered the American psyche for nearly a week, two people came forward to address them: Sarah Palin and President Obama. And their speeches could not have been more different. Where Palin focused on the shooter, the president focused on the victims. Where Palin focused on individualism, the president focused on community. Where Palin focused on her own self-exoneration, the president encouraged humility. And where Palin focused on not being silenced, the president challenged us to transcend political rhetoric and make our country a better place, to turn our country into what a child could imagine it to be.
President Reagan said, "We must reject the idea that every time a law is broken, society is guilty rather than the lawbreaker. It is time to restore the American precept that each individual is accountable for his actions. Acts of monstrous criminality stand on their own."
For those who were harmed, those who were killed, they are part of our family. An American family, 300 million strong. We may not have known them personally, but surely we see ourselves in them.
But especially within hours of a tragedy unfolding, journalists and pundits should not manufacture a blood libel that serves only to incite the very hatred and violence that they purport to condemn. That is reprehensible. And they claim political debate has somehow gotten more heated just recently. But when was it less heated?
As we discuss these issues, let each of us do so with a good dose of humility. Rather than pointing fingers or assigning blame, let's use this occasion to expand our moral imaginations, to listen to each other more carefully, to sharpen our instincts for empathy, and remind ourselves of all the ways that our hopes and dreams are bound together.
And we will not be stopped from celebrating the greatness of our country and our foundational freedoms by those who mock its greatness by being intolerant of differing opinion and seeking to muzzle dissent with shrill cries of imagined insults.
I want our democracy to be as good as Christina imagined it. I want America to be as good as she imagined it. All of us, we should do everything we can do to make sure this country lives up to our children's expectations.
What you just saw is the difference between someone who has nothing to offer but political opportunism and someone who has a vision and a way to heal the country. And it just may be the first of many distinctions that we'll see between these two individuals if indeed Sarah Palin intends to run for president in 2012. And in that regard, yesterday was more than a tale of two speeches. It was a tale of two parties, two ideologies. In the days since the shooting, many voices have spoken out for stricter gun control laws, like the reinstatement of the assault weapons ban. The right has responded with a resounding no, aside from Congressman Peter King, who supports gun controls but only to protect himself and members of Congress. In the days since the shooting, many have called for better health care services for the mentally ill. The right has responded by moving ahead with their plans to repeal Obamacare, legislation that substantially invests in mental health care. And in the days since the shooting, there's been a call for greater civility in public discourse. The right has responded with indignation and an overly defensive posture, a telling response at the very least. But even before this Saturday, this tale of two parties was well established. For generations, progressives have tried to move our country forward In the face of crises and tragedy and inconvenient truths and difficult times, and conservatives have said no at every step of the way. Just in the last 2 years, the party of no stood in the way of health reform, even as 50 million Americans are uninsured and tens of thousands of Americans die every year because of it. The party of no stood in the way of financial reform, even as our economy melted down thanks to Wall Street's crimes. The party of no stood in the way of civil rights, opposing the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The party of no stood in the way of removing corruption from politics by opposing the Disclose Act that would have let us know who's buying all those political advertisements around campaign time. The party of no stood in the way of holding transnational oil corporations accountable in the wake of the BP catastrophe, and in fact was apologizing to them. The party of no stood in the way of equal pay for equal work for women. The party of no stood in the way of ending human rights abuses and opposing the shutdown of Guantanamo. I could keep going, but that's all just in the last 2 years. Before that, every progressive achievement that's moved our nation forward and improved the lives of countless Americans has faced passionate opposition from one source, the right, and the corporations and millionaires and billionaires that fund it. From instituting a minimum wage, to enabling unions, to the creation of Medicare, to the creation of Medicaid, to the creation of Social Security, to the expansion of civil rights, to increase protection for our food supply, our drug supply. Each one of these and many other milestones in American history, 40-hour work week, I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. Every single one only came about after a brutal and prolonged debate with the right and over their opposition. A debate that occurred generations too late, in many cases, thanks to obstructionism on the part of the right. And debates that will be flared up once again as today's Republican Party attempts to turn back the clock on all of these American achievements. The conservatives' idea of a perfect America existed back in the 1880s. We call it the robber baron era, before Teddy Roosevelt kicked corporations out of politics. Back when the robber barons ran the show and racist Jim Crow laws secured their power in politics. Famed conservative thinker William F. Buckley once said, "A conservative is a fellow who is standing athwart history yelling, 'Stop!' Today, as one of America's leaders recovers in a hospital, and 6 of our citizens are buried, and the rest of us try to move forward to make our nation better, guess who's yelling, 'Stop'?" In just a few days, we'll be celebrating the birthday of Martin Luther King, the Reverend Martin Luther King. And in this time of uncertainty of the future, let's turn to his words for hope. He said, "When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize," the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, "let us realize the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." As American history has repeatedly shown us, our nation will emerge from this tragedy stronger and more than ever, more just, no matter who tries to stop us.